Hey, welcome back to the Branch 458 podcast. I got Eric Robinson, E-Rob, with me today.
Hello.
Uh, we're going to be talking about our rally coming up that's going to be happening nationwide, and I'll let Eric talk a little bit more about that. And then we're also going to talk about the topic of TSP. I know we talked about that a while back, and we're getting around to it. So here we go. Kick us off, Eric.
All right. And yeah, sorry about the delay on the TSP info. I think we promised that to everybody in our Thanksgiving special. It was supposed to be an awesome Christmas gift for everybody, some good TSP info. But Casey has been real busy. I have been super busy. So here we are today. We're going to talk about that. But yeah, first of all, Sunday, March 23rd at the Oklahoma State Capitol, the South Plaza, from 2 to 3 p.m., we're having our letter carrier rally. We want as many letter carriers as possible can come out on that Sunday. The media is going to be there. I've been in contact this past week with four different media groups, three of which were really excited. A couple of the ladies I talked to told me that they're completely supportive of our cause and they wanted the info that same evening. So we're definitely going to have the media out there, and the more people, the better, because that way, when it's on the news, and we're going to have some speakers, we can kind of let the public know some topics that are important to us to try to get some public support, so that they hopefully contact their representatives in Congress, the Senate, even President Trump, whoever they feel like reaching out to. Um, the topics, the number one topic, well, let me back up. This has kind of evolved a little bit because initially, when the idea of the rallies came up, I had heard that there were different branches across the country a couple months ago. We're starting to plan some, rallies, even like some contract rallies, because we had voted down the tentative agreement. We had, it looked like arbitration was coming. And then, kind of as the weeks have kind of unfolded, some other topics have kind of presented themselves, and namely, which I'm sure everybody's heard of, I know you know about it, is this push for either the privatization or the dismantling of the postal service. Um,
Hell no.
yeah, that's kind of the tagline on a lot of these rallies is "Fight like hell, hell no." And this is something that kind of people on both sides of the aisle, regardless of where you're at politically, could easily come together and support the post office and support the letter carriers. There's President Renfro put out a statement the other day um, saying that there is lots of efficiencies that can be found and things that need to be changed, namely the way that our pension liabilities are calculated, some of the financial um, obligations for the postal service. And the union welcomes Doge's involvement, I believe is what he said, but what has to stay in the forefront is that we're a separate entity. We don't want to be privatized. It would be detrimental to the country. It would definitely not be good for the letter carriers.
Mhm.
Um, because when I think privatization, I think UPS, brown shirts, big brown trucks. But when other people think privatization, they think Uber. They think Postmates. Um, well, yeah, right, Casey. I mean,
Yeah.
so some people that are not friends of the post office, if they're going to have their say so in privatization, which end of that spectrum you think we're going to end up on?
Yeah, yeah, you got a good point. I
Yeah,
mean, it's scary.
yeah. I am not a glorified pizza delivery driver. I'm a letter carrier for the United States Postal Service. My customers love me. Americans love us, and we do an important service. And so, anyway, the purpose of the rally is to bring that topic to the forefront, to gain public support. Also, to let the public know that we need support for the Protect Our Letter Carriers Act, which has been reintroduced. I think Ken told me the other day in the last 3 years, we've had five or six robberies in Oklahoma City at
Mhm.
gunpoint.
Yeah.
Southeast Station's had a couple. War Acres in the past has had three that I know of. You're from
Yeah.
War Acres.
Yeah, three, and then two of them were on the same person.
Yeah, Jeremiah Grant. Um, So, that's going to be an important topic. The House Resolution 70, HRES 70, has currently, I believe, 130 something co sponsors, and it's a resolution in opposition to privatization. So that would go a huge way in helping us out if that resolution passes. So we're going to talk about that. The Retirement Fairness Act has been reintroduced. For anyone listening that was either a casual, a TE, or most of us, a former CCA, if this bill passes, it would allow us to buy back that time. Um, I have 14 months as a CCA. How long were you?
My sentence was 25 months.
Wow. So yeah, 25 months that would be able to be added to his retirement. He did the same work as what he does now. If anything, it was probably harder because he,
Hmm.
didn't get to be on the same route every day, didn't get to have a set schedule each week. And as many of us know, CCAs kind of get the short end of the stick in many aspects. So yeah, that bill would help us be treated more fairly in retirement.
Yeah.
Um,
And we're pretty confident that that will eventually pass because it's already passed before. And it ended in like, I think it was 83, somewhere in the 80s. So this would make everything up from that point to present. You would be able to buy back your non-career time. So we just need to keep fighting for it.
yeah, it's an exciting thought to me that could be a possibility. And lastly, because of all these things, we deserve to be treated fairly by the Postal Service with the new contract. By the time our rally is going to happen on the 23rd, I believe President Renfro had his last update on Twitter was that arbitration was going to start on the 17th. And so, the focus has kind of shifted a little bit from that to some of these other topics because by the time we get a lot of these rallies, they're going to be already be in arbitration. Um, but it's worth mentioning that as well. It's not just rain, snow, sleet. It's wildfires. The other day here in Oklahoma City, we had 70-mile-an-hour winds. It's
Mhm.
windstorms. It's these robberies. It's a plethora of issues on why we absolutely deserve to be treated fairly and not be privatized or dismantled or lowered down to the status of a pizza delivery driver. Um, so as you can tell, I'm kind of passionate about this, and I know Casey and a lot of us are. So Sunday, March 23rd, 2 o'clock, Oklahoma State Capitol, South Plaza. Some important things to keep in mind: no uniforms. Don't show up in a postal hat. Don't show up in a postal shirt. We'll have our sergeant at arms come talk to you and ask you to take that stuff off. Uh, and also no politics. We're going to have some signs, some fight like hell signs, some things like that. You can make a sign of your own. If one of these topics speaks to you more than the other, just make sure anything you talk about or any signs that you bring are non-political. This isn't about Democrats. This isn't about Republicans. That's why we didn't invite any members of Congress or any of our representatives here. This is absolutely a bipartisan issue. Um, if you've seen any of the recent hearings where Postmaster DeJoy was there, he was getting it from both Republicans and Democrats that were pro post office. So I just wanted to stress that as well. This isn't going to be a platform to hash out, you know, uh, topics of a political nature or even union politics or anything like that. We're all in this together, and it's a really good time for us to be united. And this, I can't think of a better topic for us to unite behind than these different things I mentioned.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like Eric talked about, one of the major goals of this is just to get the public support. They already look at us every year. We're voted the number one most trusted federal agency there is. So we already have their support, and any carrier that sees customers on a daily basis or maybe once, twice a week, uh, it's always a friendly face to say hi to that customer and just greet them, and they're always pleasant to us for the most part. Um, but something that kind of stuck with me, we were doing a route inspection training last week, and there was a question about uh, while I'm being followed, should I get out and service this mailbox that's blocked by a car whenever I'm doing curbside delivery? And all this stuff is kind of relevant right now. We want to provide that service to our customers because we need their support now more than ever. So just go that extra mile on the street, come out to the rally, and maybe talk to some of these new news outlets if you're not comfortable being in front of the camera. Be there to support your brothers or sisters that are, and just tell somebody to come. Tell somebody to be there or watch it or spread the word. Every little bit helps.
Yeah, invite your family, invite your neighbor. Um, I actually, have a customer that mentioned it to me because I guess he had seen something on social media about how that nationwide there were going to be rallies on March 23rd. He asked me if we were having one. He asked me if him and his wife can come out there, and so I was like, by all means. So I'm not advocating for you to, on the clock be, going around using your postal time to talk about this. I was just kind of pointing out that a customer approached me and asked about it. Um, so yeah, absolutely get as many people as we can out there um, for that. I think it'll be good. This I've said it a couple of times, but this is the type of things unions do. Normally letter carriers are real quiet. You never see us on the news. You only see us coming by your house and dropping the mail, and then we're gone a few seconds later. This is an important time for the public to see us. We're right now is a time not for for us to not be quiet, and we really do have some legitimate threats potentially facing us. There's some uncertainty about our future with the current politics out there and the state of the post office. So let's do our part and see what type of impact we can have. If we only can sway the needle 1 or 2% in our direction, that could be a game changer. It really can when you're talking about something as broad as this topic. Um, anyway, I guess that's all I got to say about that. The second topic that we had been promising for months to talk about was the Thrift Savings Plan, TSP. Um, I tell all my carriers at my station that if you come here, you work 20, 25, 30, 35 years, sacrifice your body, your joints, all those Saturdays away from your family where you're out there, putting paper in boxes and delivering packages. If someone was to spend all these decades devoting themselves to the service of the American public and not come to the end of the rainbow and have a big old pot of gold waiting on you, that would be a real travesty. I know a couple of, I guess what I'd refer to as more senior carriers that want to retire, but they can't afford to retire right now because they didn't plan properly with their thrift savings plan decades ago when it was first introduced. I don't want to be delivering mail when I'm 70 years old. What
Yeah.
about you?
Heck no.
Yeah.
Hell no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hell no. We're gonna fight like hell against working till 70, right? So that's why I've kind of had the desire to have a brief episode about this to kind of go over some of the basics. I would recommend anybody listening to this. Of course, if you're listening to it while you're driving or with an earbud in, walking around the store or whatever, it might benefit you to listen to this when you're at home, where you can open up your laptop, log into your TSP account, and be able to kind of look in real time at some of the things I'm going to talk about here in the next couple minutes. So first of all, Casey, do you know your username and your password for your TSP? Do you have that info?
Yes, I do.
Okay, good. If you don't have it, to anybody that's listening, you need to get on the ball and get that immediately, soon, this week. You need to put in the request on there to change your password. They'll mail you a pin. It takes a little bit. It takes, it's not just a 5-minute process if you've forgotten some of your info. Don't delay that. Don't wait 6 months from now and then be like, oh yeah, I should have got that stuff.
Well, yeah, because you're going to keep forgetting and keep putting it off, and then it's going to be retirement time, and you forgot.
Yeah. I put it off for the first 3 years I worked here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm a prime example. I was talking to my buddy Andy Baker over at Westside years back about this TSP thing, asking him, man, do you really know much about that? Neither of us did. And so we just kind of started educating ourselves and got online and looked up some info. And then all of a sudden I realized, holy crap, I've just let 3 years go by and I've not, been in, you know, taking an interest in my retirement. So it's real important. So that's step one is make sure you know your username and password. The website is tsp.gov. tsp.gov. Now, one thing to keep in mind about your TSP is it's one third, it's kind of like one leg of a three-legged retirement plan that we're going to have for anybody that's federal employee retirement, the FERS. People that were SERS, which was anyone hired before, I believe it's 1980, January of 1985. I may have the date wrong there, but it was in the 80s. Anybody that's still working, because there's a few of us out there before that date, they have a completely different retirement setup. So for all the rest of us, you have three parts to your retirement. Number one is going to be your Social Security. Whatever that ends up being, every person's going to be a little different. So that's going to be part of it. Two is going to be your pension, also sometimes referred to as your annuity from the Postal Service. Now, in that magazine they send out periodically to us, you can look towards the back and it gives like annuity breakdowns for people that retire on certain, months of the year. And it has kind of to the right, like a chart, a graph. Do you know what I'm talking about, Casey? Have you seen that?
That's in the postal record.
I believe that's where that's at.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was either that one or the Eagle, but I'm pretty sure Postal Record's the one that has it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the postal record.
Okay. Um, So either way, you can open that up and look at that, kind of see, what current retirees are drawing for their pension based off of how many years of service they have. And so that's going to be about a third of it, if you would. And then the last part is this thrift savings plan. I sometimes refer to it as a government 401k. The Postal Service will match up to the first 5% that we put into it. Now, for any employees that were hired from, I believe, January 2020 on, upon you being making career, the Postal Service is automatically enrolling you in a 5% contribution of your own.
Mhm.
Anyone that was hired prior to 2020, if you've never touched your TSP, you have a 3% contribution that's being put in on your own. And then for any of the OG carriers out there that started working back in the 90s, they only have the 1% automatic agency contribution. So if they've never set it up, you only got that 1% from the post office going in, and it's going into the G fund, which, if you don't know what the G fund, we'll talk about that here in a minute. So I need to make sure everybody understood kind of the basics of that, what this TSP is. Now, on tsp.gov, once you get your username, once you get your password, you would get on the website, and when you log in on the main page, there's a section here kind of to the left, you have quick links. It talks about like your account summary. It shows how much you have in there, shows what your year to date rate of return is. You can manage your beneficiaries. So, Casey, one day in the future when you pass away, whoever you have listed as your beneficiary is who your TSP money is eventually going to go to. So,
Mhm.
whether it's a child, a parent, a spouse, if you have nobody listed, then it's going to be complicated for whoever manages your estate whenever you pass on. So you need to make sure that that's information's in there and that you update it in case you've had any recent life changes. So anyway, it's got all that. Now there's a section on here called TSP Basic, and if you just punched it right in, tsp.gov/TSP dash basics. And from here, there's some drop downs. You got one that says manage your plan, one that says fund options, fund performance, kind of so on and so forth. Over to the right, it's got several of them. What I'd want to draw your attention to is under TSP basics, it talks about how the TSP fits into your retirement. And if you click on that, it kind of goes through what I talked about, how that there's two uh, different types of letter carriers: federal employees retirement system, civil service retirement system. Um, and for 99% of us listening, we're the FERS, the Federal Employee Retirement System. So on the left there, it says TSP Basics. The next one talks about move money into the TSP. Now, let's say your previous job, you had a 401k already set up, you'd been contributing to it for so many years, and now you work here.
Mhm.
You have the option of keeping that money in that fund with your previous employer. But you also have the option of moving all that money into your TSP. So you're not starting from scratch with our investment plan. You can shift it all over. Now, I'm not a investment advisor, neither is Casey. Anything you hear either of us say today, do your due diligence. Whenever you listen to those radio shows and they talk about that stuff and they give that big legal disclaimer, that's what I'm doing right now. So anything you hear me say from this point forward, at your own risk. Do your own research. Casey, if you take any of my advice and it falls apart for you horribly, it's not
It's
my fault.
it's on
Okay.
me.
It's on you 100%. So just keep that in mind. Always do your own homework. And if you don't know where to look, if you don't know what to research, this TSP basics section of the Thrift Savings Plan website has a ton of this information. It really is broke down for in a lot of layman's terms so anybody can understand it. Um, so yeah, so there's there about moving the money into the TSP. One benefit of that is our expense ratio for the funds is lower than 99% of the other 401k investment funds out there. And that's according to an article that I believe was in Bloomberg of January 2025. Um, and all that that means is if you go open an account with Fidelity or with Charles Schwab, every year there's a percentage that they charge you, kind of like commission, if you would. That's the expense ratio is what it's referred to. Like 1% of it they take or half a percent. Um, if you want to know the details of each fund, the G fund, the I fund, the S fund, the F fund, the C fund, the mutual fund, that's kind of wordy. It's all here on the TSP site, so I'm not going to go into those details and put you to sleep. Yeah, that's actually the very next category, expenses and fees, as you kind of go down this list. Talking about the designated beneficiaries, update your mailing address anytime when you move. We of course update it with the union, we update it with the postal service. A lot of times people don't think about updating it with their TSP. So you definitely want to make sure that when you have those type of major changes like moving, you want to get that updated. Now, as you continue to go through this TSP basics, the next one is making contributions. And the topic listed here is traditional and Roth TSP contributions. Now, Casey, do you know the difference between traditional TSP and Roth TSP?
Uh, Traditional, it takes out your taxes whenever you put it in, and Roth, it's whenever you take it out. Correct?
Correct. So, traditional, every paycheck, whenever you have your TSP allotment pulled out to be invested, it is tax free. You will pay the taxes on that money and on any growth that that money experiences over the life of your career. You'll pay those taxes in retirement when you start making the withdrawals. Okay. Roth, you pay the taxes up front. So when they pull, $100 out of my paycheck, it is not before taxes. It is after, it is with post-tax money. But then the benefit of that is throughout my career, that money, any earnings it gains when I go to make my withdrawals in retirement, I will not pay any taxes on that initial investment nor any of the gains that come from it. Now, on the surface, I know for me, when I heard about that, I was like, oh, wow, Roth is definitely the way to go. But that may not be the best option for everyone. Number one, you may not be able to afford to have that little bit extra come out of your check right now, depending where you're at the pay scale. Um, so there's that to keep in mind. If you do 10% Roth compared to your coworker doing 10% traditional, if you guys are making, at the same step, the person that's doing the 10% Roth is going to have smaller take home pay because he's paying the taxes now. Now, one thing that I've heard people talk about, and there's lots of YouTube videos you can even watch on the differences and the advantages and disadvantages of both traditional and Roth. So I would encourage you to look that up. Uh, but a lot of those videos and talks, um, one thing they focus on is you kind of need to think about where you're going to be financially when you retire. Because some people, it may benefit them to you know, pay the taxes in retirement, depending on like if you're going to have retirement that comes from, possibly what, like rental properties. If you're investing in rental properties now and you go to retire and you're going to be having that income, you may be better off having Roth where you're not paying taxes on that. So your overall tax liability is less. For some other people, like myself, maybe where I don't have those type of investments, I'm mainly just going to be having my TSP and the pension and the Social Security. I might be okay doing the traditional. where if I pay those taxes down the line, it's not going to put me in a higher tax bracket. And so that's just both examples are hypothetical. You got to do your own research on it. And if you got more questions about that, if you see me at the hall, feel free to hit me up and I can kind of point you in the direction of some different websites that I like to look at to get some more knowledge um, and all that. Let me see here. It also talks about how much you can contribute, which is interesting. So when you go to Postalese, that's where you actually make. So you go to Light Blue, go to Employee Apps, go to Postalese. That's where you can determine if you're traditional, if you're Roth, and what percentage each you're doing. And you can even do both. You can put 5% traditional, 5% Roth, where 10%, is coming out each check. So Postalese is where you have that at. Um, the IRS has each year they have a maximum amount that you can contribute to a TSP. I know at one point it was $23,600. I think it's went up to about over 24,000 in the last year or so. So if you're at step A, that may seem like, a mountain of money that's completely unreachable. But as you progress through your career, you may be one of those people that feels a need to bump up your contributions to such an amount, where you're really loading that TSP up. Does that make sense?
Or maybe as you pay off things like you pay off a car, you just move that payment into your retirement. So now you're still have the same debt to income ratio, but you're putting that towards your retirement instead of towards your car.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, somebody gets to the point where their mortgage is paid off. Maybe take a portion of that and throw it into the TSP. So that's why there is a maximum amount to where you can really load that sucker up if you want to. So I wanted to mention that. It's got more details on that here on the site under TSP Basics. Um, there's also a section on here that says investing strategies. Now, one thing I like about the TSP site is they have free TSP webinars that you can register for at different times of the year, where they'll actually have an expert. So unlike me and Casey, they'll have someone that this is their forte. Go through, for an hour or so, a lot of details on this and answer questions. So I'd really recommend signing up for one of the webinars at some point. What else we got here? Underneath the investment strategies, it talks about compound earnings and dollar cost averaging. Um, Casey, do you know what dollar cost averaging is? Do you know what they mean when they talk about compounded earnings?
Compounded earnings, yes. Dollar cost averaging, no.
Okay. Tell us about the compounded earnings, kind of like the general basic concept of it.
So it would be how I understand it is if you earn interest or you have earnings on something, it goes into your larger pot, and then that pot will earn interest and so on. So it constantly compounds on itself.
Absolutely. Um, so yeah, and it talks about that on here. So anyone that's not familiar with that concept, you put $100 a check in for 30 years. You don't just have that 30 years worth of, $100.
Yeah, you're not just earning interest on the $100.
Yeah,
You earn interest and then it adds to the 100, and then you
correct.
earn interest and it adds to that. So
So really what's happening is after a year, you're not just contributing the $100 a check. You now have all of last year's contributions that are now acting like their own separate investment that are also earning money for you. So it's almost kind of like a snowball effect.
mhm.
You start, in your 20s or early 30s, and then by the time you hit your 60s, that $100 a check, that $200 a check that you're doing really exponentially, just blows up on you in your balance. Um, Oh, the dollar cost averaging. Now, I'm not going to try to really go into detail on this because it would be really confusing without being able to point at my computer screen and explain it. But there's a section under here, under investment strategies, where it breaks this down. The concept of dollar cost averaging is that you don't really worry what the market's doing. Every check, you're contributing the same amount. And so as the market goes down a little bit, the the funds that your money's being invested into, which I'll explain here in a minute what that even means. the value of them may go down a little bit. So let's say a fund is 20 bucks and I invest $100. Every check, it's buying 5 shares of that. Let's call it the G fund. Okay. But if the market maybe goes down a little bit and now that fund is only worth $10, if I'm still investing that same $100 every check, what's happening now is instead of it just buying 5 shares at $20 a share, it's now buying 10 shares at $10 a share. So you're investing the same amount no matter what. But then when the market recovers some and that $10 a share is now worth $25 a share, I'm now only getting 4 shares for every 100 bucks I put in. But because I've been consistently contributing every pay period when the market was down and then when the market was up, it's this concept known as dollar cost averaging. And so when you take the average over a 12-month span of the market lows, the market highs, you come up with a number in the middle where it's like, okay, your average fund was purchased at $18 a share. And so, what this kind of addresses is people that get worried about the market and they're trying to watch it like every week, every month in regards to their TSP fund. And they're like, oh no, the market's down right now. Maybe I should move some of my stuff over. Maybe I should kind of mix it up a lot. And if you develop a strategy, if you find a fund that you're comfortable putting your money into, and then you just kind of stay the course and you invest it in those different funds you like, whether the market's down or up, this concept of dollar cost averaging is going to work in your favor over the long run. Does that make sense, Casey?
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
understand that.
Okay. So like I said, it gives a chart on here and it breaks it all down to where if that wasn't clear, you can see it for yourself, and that'll be a big help to you. Lastly, and it doesn't talk about it here on the site, but there are different social media TSP groups out there that you can find on your own that have other federal employees that belong to these groups, like on Twitter, Facebook, for example, and you can kind of learn from each other. I'm not going to necessarily promote like a specific one on here, but I have a Facebook group I belong to. It has over 80,000 federal employees in it, and it's ran by this gal and this guy, and they share different types of investment articles. They share throughout the week updates on what some of the different funds are doing performance wise throughout the month and throughout the year, and then they make different recommendations. They kind of share with everyone, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's my strategy. And once again, do your own homework, do your due diligence, be a little careful with that, but that's something I've gotten a lot of good info from, and I've actually learned a lot by joining a social media group that has that type of focus. So I wanted to kind of mention that to you as well. And if you don't know kind of where to look or where to start with that, if you see me at the Union Hall, feel free to grab me, and I can tell you which ones I look at. I just don't really want to, make a recommendation out here. That way, if it goes bad for you, you can't blame me. You know. So
Smart.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so we talked about the investment strategies, the funds. So when you're on the TSP site, to the right, it says fund options. So if you're going left to right, it says manager plan. Second category over is fund options. And when you click on that, that's where you see the category of investing strategies. That's where you see where it breaks down the different types of investment options. Below that, it talks about life cycle funds, individual funds, and the mutual fund window, which is something new they've recently added. So let me explain what the life cycle funds are. Under here, you have the options of L income, L 2025, L 2030, L 2035, all the way through L 2070. And what these are is these are individual funds that, based off of your anticipated retirement date, the TSP, the organization that manages the TSP funds, they kind of have these already like pre-set up for people that don't really want to mess with it. People that maybe don't have the knowledge or don't have the time to gain the knowledge on, which fund's the best to put my money in. They kind of manage it for you. And then what happens is over the length of your career, every paycheck, you're making your TSP deposit, it gets dropped into this life cycle fund or this L fund. So every quarter, they rebalance it as you get closer and closer to retirement to where at the beginning of your career, you're going to be exposed to a greater amount of risk. The investments are going to be a little bit more volatile, which is perfectly fine if you got 35 years till you retire. But if you're 3 years away from retirement, you're probably going to have a different investment strategy than me and Casey. I've got at least 21 years left. How many you got?
Oh, about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so our investment decisions are going to be different than someone that's nearing retirement. So these life cycle funds are kind of like the TSP, for dummies, if you would, kind of like to just click it and leave it option. And I really like it because that ensures that someone over the life of their career is not just going to be dropping their money and to like maybe a low performing fund like the G fund or the F fund, and then come to the end of their career and have a small amount.
Mhm.
I have a family member. His father in law was a clerk and he retired with, I believe it was 32 years in. He had never contributed to his TSP. He only had the 1% automatic agency contribution. And it was due to a medical reason that he had to retire. So his wife was handling a lot of this. And they got a hold of my brother, and he got a hold of me because he knew that, I work at the Postal Service and I'm involved with the union. And she was asking, Where's all his retirement money in this thing? Like, I pull it up and it only shows that there's $21,000 in here. But he's been here for 32 years. Like, shouldn't there be a lot more? And as I kind of dug into it with her and found out that he had never made any additional changes or contributions, he just thought it was going to be okay. He just thought the Postal Service was going to take care of it for him. And he only had that 1% option in there. Isn't that sad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
32 years for that. That's not even 1,000 a year.
Yeah. Um, So you know what? If you only take one thing away from this podcast, it will not be okay. Okay? It will not be fine and dandy. You have to take control of this. You have to educate yourself and you have to manage your retirement actively. And if you don't know how, if you find it intimidating, get a hold of somebody in your branch or there in your station that you trust. Ask them if they know about it. And if they don't, both of y'all need to go find somebody that does. Um, so anyway, that's just kind of an example I wanted to give of why these life cycle funds are really good for maybe someone that doesn't have the time to dig into all this, and you'll still be able to get good rates of return over your career. The life cycle funds are split up between the G fund, the here, let me make sure I don't miss any. The G fund, the F fund, the C fund, the S fund, and the I fund. So there's 5 different individual funds that you can put your TSP contributions into, and the life cycle fund just puts a little bit in each of them. So that way it kind of diversifies your investment. Um, do you got any questions or comments on that, Casey? I know I kind of blew through that kind of
No.
quick.
So now, thankfully, I'm pretty sure if you got hired today, uh, the agency would automatically contribute the 5%, and they will slot you into the life cycle fund that is closest to your target retirement date based off of your age. And actually, I think it's just based off of your age at that point. But they automatically slot you into the closest life cycle fund.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you were born between 1980 and 1984, or you plan to withdraw from your TSP account starting in 2043 to 2047, then the L 2045 fund is the one you would want to go with.
Yeah.
And then you would never have to change it again because every quarter they slightly rebalance it to a little bit less risk exposure over the length of your career so that by the time you get to the end of your, approach that 2043, you're going to have a large portion of your TSP in something that's has very little volatility like bonds, and earlier on you're going to have more exposure such as like in the stock market or the S&P 500.
Yeah.
So
Which thankfully, and even though you are slotted into a life cycle fund, I would still check it because this is constantly evolving. This is constantly getting better. I know whenever I got hired, they only had life cycle funds for every 10 years, and now it's every 5 years. So who knows? There might be every 2 years in the future. We don't know. Um, but let's say you do want to get on here and change how you invest. How would you go about doing that?
I'm glad you asked. I actually have that written down. So, what we're going to do, let me log into my TSP account. I was already logged in, but I think it timed out on me. Okay, great. Now I'm logged in. So, if you want to make changes to some of these things, once you log in, it sends like a text message to your phone for kind of like two-step authentication. You can also have it, I believe, like shoot it over to your email. Um, from when you log in, along the top, you're going to see change investments. So you want to click on that. The screen that it takes you to, you're going to have three different options going left to right. The first one's going to say change your investment mix. Choose how much of your current balance and or your future contributions to invest in each fund. Let me stop right there and explain something. When you're in here making these changes, you have to think of this as there's two different um, pools of money, if you would. You have what I call your old money, then you have your new monies. And the way to think of that is like your old money or like your current investments. That's everything you've contributed your entire career, all the um, all the I'm blanking here, all the what's it by when you go into the TSP?
Stocks,
Uh, well, not stocks, all the individual, um,
plans.
no, not plans. I don't know if this will get edited out or not, but every time you make a purchase, it purchases individual shares. That's what I'm thinking of. Thank you. So when you're in here, all your shares that you've had purchased for you your entire career, that's like your current money. That's like your old money. It will then refer to something as future contributions. That's what's going to be coming out of every paycheck from this day forward. So it's like new money and old money. Does that make sense how I broke that down?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So as you're making these changes, you may want all of your old money in a certain fund. Like, for example, this past year, I had like 80% of my old money in the C fund. And then I had 20% of my old money in the S fund. Well, at the change of the new year, the market was kind of volatile. Some things got shook up. So I made some changes to my old money to try to, avoid a loss, if you would, or minimize the amount of loss I had. But that whole time, my new monies, that every paycheck it's coming from, I was purchasing like 90% from the S fund because the S fund was down. So every week I'm buying shares of the S fund kind of like on sale because the value of that fund had plummeted for a little while. And then in the future, when the market recovers for the S fund, I'm going to have exponential growth because I bought them all cheap. And then when the price kind of goes back to where it is normally, end up with a 10, 12, 15% gain. So that's kind of up to your own investment strategy and what you feel comfortable with. When you're on here, you got to have the clear distinction in your mind between your future investments and your current balance, which is also I like to refer to as old money. So, having said that, underneath the category change your investment mix, you can click on get started. And it pops up here and it actually asks you, what investment mix do you want to change? Money that's already in the plan. And then it says right below it, your new mix will be applied to your current balance. In a later step, you'll be able to apply it to your future contributions as well. Then the second option, what investment mix do you want to change? Only money that will be contributed in the future. Your future contributions will be invested according to your new mix. So I guess I hadn't looked at this in a little bit, but I believe they've updated this, and the verbiage is really kind of easy on the eyes. The way it used to be, it was a little bit more confusing. Um, so maybe I didn't need to go into all those explanations. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and click on only money that will be contributed in the future. And then there's a little button that says continue, and you hit that. Then when it comes up, it shows you like a pie chart and it says your current mix. And then to the right, it has your future contributions, which is blank. As you scroll down, it's going to show that, hey, I currently have 10% C fund, 90% S fund. And so every paycheck, that's what's being purchased on my behalf with this money. And then if I want to change that, let's say I wanted to change to 50% C fund. So to the right, you just click your mouse, you put in a 50 next to the percentage mark, right below it with the S fund. I'm going to change that to 50. And then if you keep scrolling down, you want to see where it says 100%. If it doesn't say 100% underneath that category on the right, that means that you did your math wrong and you still have more to add in there, if that makes sense. So then you would hit continue, and then it comes up with a screen that says review. So it kind of walks you through this so you don't accidentally change something you're not wanting to. And then it gives you the effective date, which in this example would be March 17th, 2025. After that, you would hit submit, which I'm not going to do because I have everything the way I want it. And then it'll come up and say, are you sure you want to cancel? Yes. So you can go through there. Once you hit submit, you're going to get a confirmation screen. You'll also receive a confirmation email telling you. And then the next day when the market opens, so if I would have actually made that change, Monday is when, the shares would have been reallocated and they would have repurchased it.
Mhm.
Woo, that's a lot. Um, Also on here, back to that screen that says change investments, you can also move money between funds. So you can even move a specific amount of money out of some funds and into other funds. I normally just deal with the percentages. I've never done specifically the dollar amounts. In my opinion, that's kind of more of a advanced TSP user, which I am not. But
Yeah, me neither.
yeah, yeah, I'm just a mailman. Yeah, I'm just a letter carrier. I put paper in boxes for a living. Don't listen to me with this stuff, okay? I'm telling you some good stuff about TSP, but outside of that, I don't know what I'm talking about. There's also something on here about setting up a mutual fund window account. And that's something new they've added in the last couple of years. I haven't really dove a whole lot into it, but they do have a blue link that says learn more. So when I click on learn more, and typical government website, it's not doing anything. Here we go. It says learning. Yeah, it gives you a whole section about what the mutual fund window account offers. It talks about the account fees, the minimum balance and transfer requirements, um, and taking a loan or a withdrawal from your mutual fund account. So anyway, I think I've kind of beat that horse to death as far as the different ways to change stuff and whatnot. Now, I did want to talk a little bit more. I mentioned about the life cycle funds, and then I kind of briefly rattled out that there's the G fund, the F fund, the C fund, S fund, and I fund. Um, you can go on here underneath. So you click risk savings plan to go back to the main page, and then under where's it at? Where's it at? Well, under investments, that's the tab it's under. You'll get a drop down and you can click on fund. It says portfolio, which shows you what you currently have, and you can look at your um, money like year to date, last quarter, last 12 months, last calendar year, or your own date range to kind of see what your rate of return has been. So that way, if you really want to get into the weeds, you can look at all that. Below that, there's one that says fund performance. And this I really like. You're able to scroll through and like, let's look at the C fund. It shows on here that for this year, the C fund has a negative 3.86% rate of return. For the month of February, it was a negative 1.3% return. But for a rolling 12 months, the rate of return was 18.36%. And then it gives you a 3-year rate of return, which is 12.51%, and a 5-year, which is 16.81. So you can look through as you're trying to choose which funds to invest in, and you can kind of see what their recent rate of returns have been. If I hover my mouse over where it says C Fund on this screen and click on it, it opens up a PDF that talks about the specifics of each fund. So it kind of goes into the details. And I'm only going to talk about one of them, the C fund, as an example. When I click that and it opens the PDF, it goes through here and says the C fund offers the opportunity to earn a potentially higher investment return over the long term from a broadly diverse portfolio of stocks of the largest U.S. companies. I know in the past when I've looked at it, it's been things like Tesla, Google, Microsoft, Berkshire Hathaway, I believe, was one of them. And then BlackRock, which is the company that manages our TSP funds, they will periodically throughout the year rebalance what companies are in the C fund. So you have, a big old room full of experts that do this 24/7, determining, in their opinion, what's going to be the best companies to invest your money in that C fund. And you can go through here and you can look that over its inception since January of 1988, the growth of $100, if you would have invested it in the C fund back on that date, it would now be worth $3,985. Yeah. Um, so each one of these funds, you can do that. Um, there's a lot more I'm not going to go into. So look up that, figure out which funds you like, which ones you don't. Um, I know for a lot of employees, a lot of veterans, I've heard that when they were in the military and they were first told about TSP, they were just told to put it in the G fund. And a lot of the old time carriers I know have told me that they had just always been told to put it in the G fund. Well, some of those people are some of the same carriers that are having to deliver mail past 70. Really do your homework here. There's more than just one option. The G fund is kind of like a savings account, is how I like to liken it. It's definitely okay to have some money in there, but unless you're just a couple years away from retirement, most, the I guess you could say most folks don't have a lot of their money in the G fund if they're further away from retirement. They like to put it in C or S or I, which is like an international fund. Does all that make sense? Any questions on that, Casey?
No, no question. It makes sense.
Awesome.
G fund is something that's very, very safe. It has historically never lost money, but like Eric said, it very, very slow earning.
Yeah, yeah. Back to the main TSP page underneath investments. If my laptop will, here we go. All right. So if you go back to the main TSP page underneath fund options, and then if you scroll down under individual funds, you can click on up to three funds and compare them. So let's say you're currently in one of the life cycle funds and you see that it shows that, over the last 15 years, it's got a 6% rate of return. You can go in here under individual funds, click on C fund, S fund, G fund, and it'll show you that, for example, the C fund has an 11.16% rate of return since January of 1988. So through the ups, through the downs, that's what the rate of return is. The G fund has a 4.65% rate of return. The S fund, because it's having a very rough year, is a little over 5%. So all the tools are here for you to kind of check everything out. But I just wanted to talk about some of them in detail so that way you could sit down at your laptop and maybe follow along with me. So some of that would make sense. Now, one last topic I want to cover is about withdrawals. I found out recently that some of my buddies did not know that there are different ways to withdraw from TSP prior to retirement. This is one of those moments where it's you need to like full stop, danger, Will Robinson, danger. Have a lot of caution before you even think about making any withdrawals from your TSP before retirement. You have two options. One is a TSP loan. They have something to where you can go in there under the loan section. It'll show you how much of a TSP loan you're allowed to pull out. And this is where you're borrowing money from your TSP, making a withdrawal. It's not taxable because you have to pay it back through biweekly paycheck, auto withdrawal payments. You can also go in there and pay it off early if you want and do like a direct debit from your checking account. Maybe you get your taxes back and you want to pay off your TSP loan. So let's say you go in there and you borrow $10,000. You have the option of a general purpose loan. This might be, maybe your hot water heater, blew up and maybe you had a pipe bust in your yard all at the same time and you got a $7,000 bill and, you don't have that money lying around. Uh, Taking a TSP loan is one option. What happens is there's a $50 fee or a $100 fee, depending if it's a general purpose loan or the other loan, which is known as a primary residence loan. If it's a general purpose loan, you can pay it off every other week through your check, but it can be no longer than 5 years. So you only have a maximum of 5 years to pay it off. There's a loan calculator in here where you can kind of play with the numbers. Like, okay, if I borrow $4,000 from my TSP and I want to pay it off over 48 months, and it'll show you how much per check it's going to be. The interest that you pay is rated to whatever the G fund is at the time of your loan being pulled out. So I did a TSP loan once, and I think it was 4.6%. That interest comes back to me. So it's not really true interest, if you would. It's just as I make those payments over the life of the loan, that quote unquote interest is actually going back into my TSP account. So it is a better option than, some other loans that might be out there, either through a credit card or possibly a bank. But one thing to keep in mind, this is where the danger, Will Robinson danger comes in. You're not earning money on that amount that you withdraw for the loan. So earlier, Casey, you were talking about the, compounded earnings.
Yeah.
I was talking about the dollar cost averaging and all those fun things. When you make a TSP loan out, you're removing that money from earning anything at all. So if you take 2 years, 5 years to pay it back, you're going to set yourself back a little bit on your retirement planning, and you're going to kind of have to adjust to accommodate for that loan coming out. There's a second type of loan you can do called a primary residence loan. This loan you can have up to 15 years to pay back. What's different about it is it's only allowed to be used for the purchase of a home or for like a down payment of a purchase of a home, or if you're building a home. And I've never taken that loan out, but when I looked into it one time, you have to go in and you have to provide proof to the TSP that this is what the money's being used for, either like closing documents or some type of statement from your um, contractor. I don't know who you would get that from. I didn't dive that deep into it. Does that make sense? The difference between the two?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you have two options for loans. Be very cautious about them because you're not gaining, earnings on that money. And if you're earlier in your career, definitely try to avoid taking the loan out. You want to get as much in there as you can in the first 10, 15 years of your career so that you can have that compounded interest over that 20, 30-year career you're going to have. And if you kind of kneecap yourself in the first, 10 years taking a loan out, I mean, yes, you can recover from it. Yes, you can contribute more in the future, but it's just earnings that you'll never get back. And so you'll never really, know what the impact of it'll be. There's a second option for a type of withdrawal, and it's what's referred to as hardship. Now, when I looked at this earlier underneath the hardship, it talked about that if you have like large medical bills, if you're in a bankruptcy type situation, which by the way, I also learned in my research for this episode that if you have to claim bankruptcy, they cannot touch your TSP.
That's good to know.
If you go through a divorce, they can definitely touch your TSP depending on the situation. So there are some instances where your TSP can be threatened. There are some that are not. Once again, do your homework, start learning these things. And so the hardship loan is something that you don't pay back. There are penalties. If you take it out before 59 and a half years, you have an automatic 10% off the top penalty. So let's say you pull out, $10,000, 1,000 of it's automatically gone. If you've been doing traditional, you now have to pay taxes on that money next time you file your taxes. So you could potentially lose 30% of it depending on where your tax bracket, leaves you at. And so hardship is really kind of a last option, in my opinion. Man, that's a lot of talking. I hope I didn't put you to sleep. I hope maybe this helps somebody. Casey's over there sleeping. I've had to wake him up twice. Not
I'm
really.
here. I'm here.
Uh, so I don't know. I'm real passionate about this, guys. I really mean what I mean when I say somebody comes into their career and does not have a pot of gold. It's going to be a shame. I had plans to have over $1 million in my TSP when I retire. I've been career for 8 years. I have another 21 to go. I've been averaging over my career, I think about a 12% rate of return with my TSP. and I'm hoping to continue that. Every time I get a step increase, I increase my contribution 0.5%. I'm still getting a raise, but I'm taking a small chunk of that and putting it into my TSP. In the past, whenever I've gotten COLAs, I've done kind of the same thing. I believe with the COLAs, I was increasing it 0.25%, since typically COLAs are less than your step increase. Everybody's got their own way of doing it. You got to keep putting the amount in there. Obviously, you could put 30% of your check, but you might be eating ramen soup every day. So you got to kind of find that balance of what makes you happy and comfortable. But you also want to be comfy when you retire. I don't want any one of our letter carriers having to eat cat food when they're in retirement, and that does happen.
I did something similar. If let's just say you get a 2% raise, I would put 1%. I would increase my TSP by 1%. So I do it by half of whatever my raise is. That way I'm getting a raise on my paycheck, but I'm also giving my future self a little bit more. So that's I did it very similar to how you do it.
How much would you contribute if you got a 1.3% raise?
Well, then I would have to do I guess 0.5%.
He didn't have a calculator in front of him. That's why I asked. I just wanted to see what he was said. I'm just being funny.
All right,
But yeah, I don't got anything else unless you do.
so that's TSP. Let's circle back to the rally. So that's remind us the date,
S-
time.
Sunday, March 23rd, Oklahoma State Capitol, South Plaza, 2 p.m.
Tell everybody.
I just did. I'll tell them again. Sunday, March 23rd, Oklahoma State Capitol, 2 p.m., South Plaza. No uniforms, no politics.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very good turnout, and it's going on nationwide. So that's the day that. How many cities did we? Was it over 300?
So Dan Versluis, our NBA, was at our branch meeting the other day. I want to say he said it was over 220 or 230 different branches have notified National that they're having a rally on that same day. I mean, guys and gals, we're going to be all over the news. And you know who's going to see this, Casey?
Everybody.
Yeah, politicians are going to see this. Postal Service leadership's going to see this. Our customers, the American public's going to see this. And arbitrators going to see it. Everybody's going to see this. We don't know what type of impact it will have. It's going to have an impact. But I'm all about it. So let's get out there. Please join me. Some people have put a lot of effort into organizing this, and let's really make it happen.
Yeah, we hope to see you there.
All right, bye everybody.
See ya.